Okay, so at the end of this meeting, not part of the meeting, I need to request future agenda items for the following meeting.
That's correct.
Thank you.
You know, as the last meeting, the city attorney said we have to call a meeting in order to call a meeting. I was very confused at that.
This doesn't make sense. So on a timeline, it could be almost half a year or more for the agendization process to be accurate, because no one seems to be able to call additional meetings, and the ability to add things to the agenda seems to be hampered and hindered by the city folks. So I just feel like this is a clear loophole in our ability to really guide any input on our end. It may take 6 months to a year. We have to have the mayor come and call people out for what is clearly a already set process. So I think at least as a body, we should acknowledge our own autonomy here. What the mayor or the council end up doing, that's on them, but at least we tried.
Liz has sent each of us a very comprehensive packet, including the minutes of the October 22nd meeting. And I hope that you've had a chance to glance at them. I'd like to know if there's any additions, corrections, or any approval.
Hi. Yes. Actually, I reviewed the minutes, and you know, when I joined this committee, I was told that the meetings are our way to communicate with the city council the thoughts about the budget and how we see Measure G funds being spent. But after reviewing the meetings, I don't see any relevant comments about that we had during the meeting. It was just procedural comments. So I would ask the person in charge of the meeting minutes to more accurately reflect the members' comments of the Measure G committee. So at this moment, I would move to have the city do that and not approve the minutes at this time.
Do I hear a second?
I second. Yeah, I second.
Is there any discussion?
I just want to share that I did go through prior publicly posted meetings, and I do find that consistent that the minutes don't properly reflect all of the contributions and opinions of the council members.
Thank you. I had a comment before we take to the vote. It's listed on here. It says Chair McGrath Massey requested information on how many miles of city streets and the location of the streets that have been repaired. Because it's reflected in the financial statement, millions of dollars have been spent. But I don't know about you, I drive around and I'd love to know where these millions are being spent, and I'd love to be able to tell my fellow citizens, because sometimes when people know you're involved, they do ask. So with that said, is there any other discussion?
Yes. Yeah. Just piggybacking on your comment, I have noticed that you know, things in the meeting minutes, you know, even some of our own comments and requests just go on unfulfilled. So you know, it is like you said, we do get approached and said, you know, well, how are you overseeing that? And you know, it's just not. It has not been the norm, you know, in my experience for the last year, that the meetings are, you know, not only reflective, but don't seem to have any substantial impact on the way our committee is being able to provide this oversight for this Measure G funds.
Right, and I'd like to add that, and I thank Mr. Pressey for, you know, very detailed presentations on the budgets, but I think what's a missing component, and you're speaking to this, Madam Chair, is the metrics that go with each of the account items. Verbally, there's a lot of presentations by city staff, but there's nothing really noted. So over time, and we're in the 5th or 6th year now of this commission, it'd be really get to, know the miles actually. I like to know how many city miles of sidewalk we've actually covered in 6 years, and have that complement the financial reporting for each one of those line items in a written format, so that we're not relying on who may or may not be able to be present on one of our meetings.
Excellent. Is there any other discussion, Jeff?
Yeah, if I may, I agree with the minute comments. The only thing I would offer to the group that's worked for me, and when I first came on this committee, I asked, again, watching how the meetings unfold and trying to get the most updated information, it was made very clear to me that I could reach out to department heads as needed for clarification. I also pinged Matt several times when I needed something, the former city manager, when I had a question, as well as, again, with Legistar. I mean, everybody's busy, but you have the ability to attend city council meetings as well as an appointee of your respective district. So I just say, some of it too is us doing our due diligence and doing our homework and knowing what's being done at the council level and being able to get clarification from the department heads on what work's being done, progress reports on that. I mean, I agree that we could probably do more here for a report out, but there's also an incredible amount of information that Matt's department has to report out on on the money side that there's not enough time in the hour or so meeting that we end up having here. So I would just lend that again, it's always the city, and Steve, I don't want to speak for you in your new position, but it's always been very easy to access those department heads and get questions answered ahead of time so that you know those things coming into this meeting.
No, I totally hear you, but again, I'm looking back through prior posted videos, and one of the comments from I think Mr. Cabrera about whether there's sufficient information to respond to Mr. Sandoval's statement that he had over 700 community members give him questions. And Cabrera's response was that, well, I think whatever's on the website is sufficient. So if these are public, somewhere it has to live. And I'm not talking about detailed narratives, but I think the metric complements the financial line item. And that would help have it be compact in one place. And if we are posting that information, great. If we really want to do a deep dive, I thank you for sharing that information. I will be reaching out to individual city members, but I think here, I think that's the missing piece to what I've observed on making sure that we have at a very overview type of level, a more complete picture. This is 10 years, 15. It's all we have are financial reports. That's a documented form. So I think if this is a 10-year measure, halfway through, it'd be great to have some metrics documented.
Lovely. And I'm going to have Elizabeth do a roll call vote. And then I have the indulgence of the committee before we have the financial report. With your okay, I'd like to read our mission statement. Why are we here, and what are we supposed to be looking at? Because I know when we get into the financial report, I personally created a matrix about what money is being spent and which one of these priorities of Measure G it hits on. And I think that might be a little bit helpful. And of course, I'm happy to provide that to Elizabeth to put in the minutes, but that's kind of the only way I can get a real handle on it, because it's a lot of money, it's very complicated, and there's all these professionals handling it, but we want to be able to quantify it. So at this time, if there's no other discussion, we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the minutes of October 22nd with the qualifying comments. Elizabeth, could you please call the roll?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, just a clarification.
Sure.
The motion was to not approve the minutes until they more accurately reflect the comments made at the last meeting. That was the motion.
I'm not sure how we're going to reconstruct from October 22nd. So I'd love some direction from either our beloved city attorney or Matt or the city manager.
I can chime in. Thank you, Chair McGrath-Massey. So in the minutes, we do have toward the end committee member comments, and those are meant to capture some of the main comments and points of communication to the city council. Obviously, and these are minute order minutes. They're not meant to be word for word. And the main purpose is to, at least of the committee member comments, is a way to communicate to the city council important things that the committee itself wants to convey. There is discussion that's transcribed on each of the items, and as Chair number of miles that's captured, and there were other comments in there. So I believe that we've captured, I guess, the most of the comments. It's not meant to be word for word. We do have each meeting recorded and published on the YouTube channel, the Salinas channel, and so that is available. I do agree that we can develop matrix and have a little more discussion on the details. We do typically get into that and have department presentations when we go right before we adopt the budget. So we bring forward each year's budget to the committee, and they get a chance to provide comments to the city council, and each department also digs into what their department is doing with the Measure G funds, and that's an eye-opener and a lot of rich and good information, and that's typically done in the May meeting. At mid-year, it's kind of a check-in, not necessarily a deep dive. Same with the October meeting, and we do have our annual financial report and audit that comes forward, where the committee's one of its charges is to, and Bridget may be talking about that next, in the purpose of the committee and its charge is to provide an annual report that's public, and the city council gets it after the audit is released, which it's being finalized now and going to go to city council at the February 2nd meeting. So I'm not sure, Liz, do you feel that there was more parts of the minute that need to be captured, or if committee members remember certain comments that they want to add that's missing, we could do that, or we could table it and bring it back next meeting and see what more we can get from the meeting. So I just wanted to add those additional comments before and see if there's a motion to move it forward, or if you still want to wait till the next meeting.
Our city attorney, Chris Callihan, had his hand up. I'm not sure if you have a comment, Chris.
There is a motion and a second on the table that we'd have to consider first, and it sounds like the motion is to continue the committee's consideration of the minutes to its next meeting, so that the issues discussed by this committee in terms of additional information in the minutes can be done by staff and brought back to the committee for consideration.
It sounds like a very reasonable alternative. I'd like to hear from the committee members. The person who made the motion, is that acceptable to you?
Yes.
The person who seconded the motion, is that acceptable to you?
Yes.
Is there any other discussion? I'd like to call for the roll, please, Liz.
Committee Member Barrera?
Yes.
Committee Member Farias?
Yes.
Committee Member Medrano? Yes. Committee Member Sandoval?
Yes.
Committee Member Wardwell?
You're muted there.
Jeff, I think you're muted. Committee Member
I thought I
Wardwell?
was getting this. I'll abstain due to absence.
And Chair McGrath Massey.
Yes.
The motion carried.
Okay, so moving right along on our agenda is our financial report. And as I said, I asked for your permission to just briefly read the words that the voters agreed to on Measure G.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry to
Yes.
interrupt, but given that this is a new meeting and I did not have an opportunity to meet with Mr. Pressey prior, could we also have an opportunity to explain the roles and responsibilities of the council or the commission and the folks attending this meeting?
Sure.
Thank you.
It's kind of in here too. So could I start with this and then have him do that? Is that acceptable, Aidee?
What form are you referring to or document are you referencing?
There was an actual, these are the actual statements that were on the ballot when people voted for Measure G.
Mhm.
And then it states that what the Citizens Oversight Committee will do is meet quarterly with the relevant department heads and make sure there's adherence to the expenditures, adhere to the stated goals and the stated promises that were made to the citizens. And the matrix that I referred to, for instance, how much money has been spent as of December 30th, and then the last financial statement we got in crime and gang prevention. So that's our job, is to make sure that we look at the financial reports and we look at the promises and that they line up, that there's alignment. Is that everyone else's understanding of our role?
And those of the non-commission members who are also attending the meeting or participating in the meeting?
It would be up to them to make comments relative to the adherence and the alignment.
What I'm referring to is, what is the role of Mr. Kerrigan or the other members here? What's their function within this commission? Since I'm new, it'd be really great, and I don't know if I had an opportunity to add it to the agenda or reach out to anybody, because I did get the offer and I did say yes, but it couldn't happen. So this is our time for addressing these things. So I think since we have 3 new folks here, it'd be great just to kind of review Ms. Soto's role, Mr. Kerrigan, because I see on the screen, Mr. Pressey, just briefly.
Chair, before you proceed.
Madam Chair, I need to jump in here. I apologize. It's a very good question and it's a good point, but none of this is on the agenda. In order to have a discussion about this topic, it needs to be agendized. The only other thing that's on your agenda this afternoon is the December 31st, 2020 Measure G financial report. So that's the only other item that this committee can discuss this afternoon. I would make 2 suggestions. One is we can prepare some written material for the committee to outline the role of the committee and the different staff members who will advise and support this committee. And we can also put this on the agenda for your next meeting so that we can have a more thorough discussion about it with all of us present.
So just, this is Mr. Callihan?
Yes.
And you are?
I'm the city attorney.
Okay, so we did discuss other things that weren't on the agenda, just so that I'm understanding things. So it's interesting that you're picking this, but we have already discussed other things. We've done introductions, we've had other discussions and other points that were brought up that were not agendized. So given that you have 3 new members here, we did not have an opportunity to add items to the agenda. So if it can be added to the next meeting, great, but that next meeting is going to take place in May. And I would like to have another meeting before then to cover that and anything else that we need to review about what our role is going to be and what we're going to need to know for the next term, the next period.
Okay, so I think given the expert direction that we have received from our attorney, I think that we need to proceed with Mr. Pressey, our financial guru report. My suggestion is going to be to add the language of the Measure G ballot measure on our agenda, and get that out there. Every time we have an agenda, it'll be published with it. So at that point, we'll stick to the agenda. That's what we're here for. And he will give us a report, and I hope you've all received the voluminous financial reports and have had a chance to review them. Mr.
Madam Chair, will we have an opportunity for future agenda items, because that is not on our agenda?
Mr. Callihan?
Yes, you can certainly communicate those things to the finance director, the city manager, who is Steve Kerrigan, or myself.
Okay, so at the end of this meeting, not part of the meeting, I need to request future agenda items for the following meeting.
That's correct.
Thank you.
I think that's an excellent clarification.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I feel a need to interject at this moment, as if the committee and the city manager, and welcome Mr. Kerrigan, takes a look at all the Measure G agendas prior to our October meeting, there was a future agenda item on there. And like I said, this is going to maybe come to a surprise, but during prior to the May meeting, I contacted the city attorney, Mr. Pressey, to call a meeting, which is within our purview, and have requested items in the past to be added to the agenda. And I was told to discuss my concerns on the agenda item listed as future agenda items. But to my surprise and a bit of frustration, they removed that item from the agenda. And so it made it really difficult to communicate these issues. Also, Mr. Callihan as well as Mr. Pressey were CC'd on several emails that I requested for us to call additional meetings. And I think one of the concerns is, what our roles and responsibilities are as far as, not just overseeing, and then also the staff's roles and responsibility, because it's unfortunate, that there was a refusal from Mr. Pressey to facilitate the contact of future members. Since I did not want to violate the Brown Act, I contacted 3 members and then requested he contact the 4th member for the calling of the meeting. We are a citizen oversight committee, and at the last meeting, you'll remember, Madam Chair, that the city attorney, Mr. Callihan, told us that the process for us to call an additional meeting is to contact either him, Mr. Pressey, or the city staff to be facilitators of those meetings. Do you recall that? And so I followed those steps, but I was highly concerned when I was told that no meeting shall be called and no facilitation of contact to the other members would be done. And so that's my concern. I take this role seriously as you do, and I'm a big a fan of rules. But at the same time, if we're supposed to be an oversight committee overseeing the funds that the city is spending and allocated to different departments, but the departments or the city attorney or, Mr. Pressey are telling us that we won't be allowed that oversight opportunity, then I'm concerned. And so, I've attempted to, and I am scheduled to speak with the mayor of these concerns as well, and we'll have the opportunity to discuss this further, to ensure that the citizens are being respected and not just dictated to, and a bit of a frustration as we have requested items on the agenda and, several times, and there's just no follow-up or no feedback. And I have reached out to the department heads as well, Mr. Wardwell. We want to ensure we're distributing Measure G funds also equitably. And so one of the things we asked for in the report was, what projects are being spent in the different districts. And so those things not getting followed up is concerning as a committee member. I'd like some follow-up, and as far as calling another meeting, I'd like us to discuss that. As the last meeting, the city attorney said we have to call a meeting in order to call a meeting. I was very confused at that. And so I just want us to make sure we're doing our job, and I'd like the citizens to feel comfortable that they are being represented well and their tax funds are being used properly, and we're allowed to ask the questions and facilitate those conversations. Thank you.
And I'm also concerned about it. And I was looking at videos and thinking this doesn't make sense. So on a timeline, it could be almost half a year or more for the agendization process to be accurate, because no one seems to be able to call additional meetings, and the ability to add things to the agenda seems to be hampered and hindered by the city folks. That's why I needed to know roles and responsibilities here, because I view the city staff as facilitators of this body, and we can come up with our opinions, and they're facilitating it to the council, not filtering it and deciding what can and can't be added onto an agenda. So I feel like we need an opportunity to review the structure of the agenda. We need to be able to meet additionally before May, and I'd like to make a motion to meet in February, if possible, if not March, to be able to review the agenda, to review roles and responsibilities, and to make sure that we're okay with the structure and format of these meetings.
And I would second that.
There's a motion that is not on the agenda. I'd like direction from the city attorney. Can we entertain that motion at this time?
No, Madam Chair, I think the motion is out of order, and there is a process for getting additional meetings scheduled that was put in place by the city council, not by city staff.
We just
And so-
illustrated that that process failed.
Right. Well, that needs to be taken up by the city council then, and the city manager and I can certainly have that conversation with the city council.
The
And we
Roth
will-
book rules that you shared said that the body, this body, is the one that is guided by the agenda. So shouldn't we have input on the items on the agenda? And if we are making a motion, why wouldn't we be able to entertain that motion? Whether someone agrees with it or not is something different, but the ability to make the motion and second it shouldn't be something that you decide whether we get to do or not. I don't feel like
requested-
I need to have a lawyer here in order to do something like a motion and get it second. It's really up to the chair and the co-chair on what they're entertaining in terms of what we do here. Even if it's not on the agenda, at least she can make that decision on whether she's going to entertain it or not.
Would I like to call for the question?
I'm not interested in violating what needs to happen and how we serve the public. I agree to a certain extent that the agenda could use tweaking, and I'm happy to entertain suggestions on how to do that legally, but we're jeopardizing ourselves. We aren't the city council. We're volunteer appointed people, and I completely agree an overhaul and a relook is necessary. I was completely unaware that there was a request on the table, and I apologize, Andrew. I came to the October meeting that I kind of out of the blue. This time I feel a lot more prepared to discuss what is on the agenda, and I'm prepared at the end of this to add the comments and the request for really taking a good look at how we work on the agenda, what's included, and how we do it. But we can't do that now because it wasn't on the agenda to begin with. You can't do that to the public. You can't tell them you're going to talk about one thing and talk about something else. So,
Well, we've done it already, this meeting. We've
Well-
done introductions and we've done other topics already, ma'am. So I just feel like this is a clear loophole in our ability to really guide any input on our end. As far as I'm concerned, we only get to see the item on the agenda. We don't have the ability to add items onto it because there's no future items on the agenda. We can't really request something. It may take 6 months to a year. We have to have the mayor come and call people out for what is clearly a already set process. So I think at least as a body, we should acknowledge our own autonomy here and be able to recognize that I've already asked for a motion to have an additional meeting to address these items. We got a second. We should be able to have a vote on it and have that be recorded. What the mayor or the council end up doing, that's on them, but at least we tried.
I think we can add that as committee comments at the end of the meeting and vote on it at that time. I think at this time, it's time to hear from Matt Pressey. Matt, you're on.
I'd like to I have a question. I've already been asked by several community members to clarify on exactly what the possibility is of increasing work on sidewalks in their neighborhoods. I think I'm seeing a line item that says sidewalks, and it's already spent at 100% budgeted this year. With items that are underspent, is there any consideration to shift funding to help address the increasing community concerns for sidewalks to be repaired?
Excellent question.
Dave Jacobs might be able to speak to that, and certainly we can look at that. Dave, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question was actually shifting money around within the Measure G funds to actually put more towards sidewalks. Yes, that could be done, but again, we look at the Measure G as a whole, and some of those funds that don't get spent might actually go toward areas that are overspent. So I would welcome any more money that I could throw at sidewalks. So.
I think since I announced that I was assigned to this commission, and in what I've observed in meetings and content in the past, it seems to be a growing focus for citizens, residents of Salinas. I don't think they're getting the pace of repairs, the scale of it, and what possibilities there are to kind of change that pace. And I've observed that there have been underspent activities, a lot of it because maybe positions haven't been filled. But I mean, something like fixing a street, I think could be a shift we can do from one year, maybe not a next, just really depending on the short-term activity on the expenses. And I think for us as members, we can go back to our community members and at least let them know we're trying to get more done where we can.
Excellent comment. Thank you. Anyone else? Who else would like to make a comment?
I have a comment.
Just a follow-up question. I think at the last committee meeting, or maybe it was a different meeting, is our backlog still approximately 20 years for sidewalks?
It's between 15 and 20 years at this point in time with the number of requests that we have. And we have one concrete crew that goes out and does repairs, but we also do major CIP work where we go out and do a whole area with sidewalks. And we do that maybe probably once a year. That would reduce that total 15-year wait time. But again, there's not a lot of money to throw at sidewalks at this point in time.
Chris, you had a comment you wanted to make? Question?
Yes, I have a couple of comments. So when people voted on this Measure G, they voted, oh, and by the way, when it was announced that I was going to be on this committee, my phone started ringing today. And so, as you know, I am very involved in the community, and people are counting on a lot of the new members here on this committee to speak up. And so, I know that's not very popular, but it is what it is. And so when I was walking the neighborhoods, when people voted on this Measure G, they were voting on it to get their sidewalk and their pothole fixed in their neighborhood, and not for when the monies came in and went to different areas, and when I was walking, different areas in the city, people are just turned off by the city. People take it upon themselves to cut their own tree down. People take it upon themselves to replace their own sidewalks because they don't believe in the city. And I couldn't believe when I saw this, and at first they don't want to talk to me because they thought I was part of the city, but then I told them that I wasn't. And then they just start pouring out their heart and soul to me. And so I was pretty embarrassed, that people were taking it upon themselves to take care of their own problems. And so when they vote on Measure G, they wanted their own sidewalks and streets and trees to get taken care of. And they haven't. I always hear that there's a 10 to 15 year backlog on tree trimming. So people take it upon themselves. Let me see. The city cleanup program. What exactly is a city cleanup program? And it was budgeted for 880,000, and 100% of it was spent. Can you tell me exactly what that is?
Dave, can you speak to that?
I believe that's the homeless cleanups that we do. When we get complaints, we go in and do a cleanup and get the streets clean, so that there's actually a sanitary area for these people to be living out on the streets at. If it's undone for a period of time, we take a risk of having other diseases come up. So we do these cleanups in Chinatown and Card Lake on the overpass. Can't think of the name of the street now. Drew a blank. I apologize. On Sanborn overpassing, there's a big encampment down there that we do cleanups on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I believe that's on the docket for city council now, Some of the new city council members have brought it up, but I always hear that up to date that the city's spent near $5 million. And I've never witnessed it, but I've been told from numerous people that when the city gets there to clean up, a lot of the homeless pack up all their stuff, go down the block, watch the city clean it up, the city leaves, and then they go back, and then they go right back where they were. And it's I mean, we don't really have much to say about that money being spent. I mean, in my opinion, it's just being wasted. I covered the tree trimming, sidewalk and drainage, covered that. I mean, I think a lot more money needs to be allocated to the neighborhoods, to the reason people passed this measure, and not to everything else that's on here. That's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
I have my hand up, and thank you. I agree with all of that. I think there's been a lot that I've seen happen, and I don't think anyone really questions that all these things are needs. I think what it is for me and working with budgets and grant budgets, things that at what point do we really make recommendations, like you said, digging into some numbers and make some like low, easy calls on reallocating some money just to get a little bit more advancement in one area where feasible and reasonable. Okay, well, I'm not talking about restructuring the budget, but like I'm looking at many things that are under 10% or at 0% expenditure halfway through a year or at a certain mark. At some point, you have to say, hey, if we have a 15 or 20-year backlog and every community member that's posting anything on Facebook isn't talking really about how many police officers we have, or maybe they do, but they're always complaining about the sidewalks, then maybe it's prudent for us to start making some recommendations on where some of this low-hanging fruit might be. Maybe if it's an additional 50,000, 100,000, even if it's one community block. You talked about your street and your tree. People are waiting for that to happen on their street too. And we just need to show, I think we need to show that and be prepared to make a recommendation. And I didn't see through all of last year when any recommendations for reallocation of funds happened. So I'm really curious to know, like, when do we actually make some gritty, real recommendations to the council on what we think about these numbers?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And as you know, and a lot of the members know, there was, hundreds of people involved in developing that LSL vibrancy plan. And when asked at one of the last meetings before it was presented to council, if you could pick one project to do, what would you do? And they talked about revitalizing or actually making safer one or two of their main crosswalks. And if you recall that conversation, that project couldn't be taken on because those crosswalks were so dilapidated that they would have to redo them. And so it was really unfortunate. So as you guys look for, projects, I'm a small business owner, so I understand the struggle. It's not fair that we're redoing one part of the city and spending all these funds when all residents are crying for on the LSL is, can we at least have a safe crosswalks? And so, that's I've talked about the LSL vibrancy plan already, and I appreciate that funding is being allocated this year. But just if you can just hear the residents, and if you were at those meetings saying, hey, can we fix the corner of Market, so our kids can have safe crossing? And then to be told, no, we can't do that, but maybe we can buy you guys a trash can or two. It's really sad. So, I just, that's my comment for that. And
the Measure G is a significant part of our budget. It's about a quarter, including the general fund, Measure E, all the general fund, and it is very important to our community. And I like the energy, I like the passion and the desire to use these valuable resources for the best of our city and the ideas behind it. So as we move forward, definitely we'll work with you. And I think, like the city manager said, getting together, I look forward to that and hearing your concerns offline and allowing that to influence how we move forward with the budget and how we're allocating resources. And
I just want to follow back with my earlier request. I do see that part of the attendees is the mayor, and I want to follow up on Callihan's suggestion that I reach out to her, and I want her to know, she didn't catch it the first half of this meeting, that we did try to request additional meetings. We did go through the manager's office, the city's office. It did not result in anything. And we need that to change. I want to be able to have an agenda that has future items, and I want to be able to meet prior to May in order to address some of these issues, because I don't see the opportunity on the calendar to do any deep dives or any meaningful discussions. Where everyone was kind of concerned on the length of time of this meeting alone, and we're only meeting how many times a year as it is. So I'd like to revisit my motion of having, which was already seconded by Chris, having another meeting, let's say March, to address and see where we are with a revised agenda, to make sure that we've gone through whatever additional education and see if the information was actually shared with us and what we actually ended up doing to make good on the offers to reach out to folks' office to get the additional information. But really, I think it's to and make sure that we don't continue this cycle. And I'm thinking about legacy and what we're really telling to the city residents about what we do with this money and what actions we make and how much oversight we're actually able to do, instead of just sitting here and accepting all the budget items as they are every year, and progress just isn't moving enough for the residents to really recognize it. And I don't want them to think that they shouldn't be supporting future measures, because there really isn't oversight. No one really listens to the commission members, and nothing ever really changes or ever happens, because that conversation and that perspective is definitely out there. So I'd like to make a motion to have additional meeting in March to discuss the items that I've highlighted already.
And I second it.
Since it wasn't an agenda item, may I just ask that we have an informal roll call vote of people who are on the committee who would be interested in doing that, so that we don't violate the Brown Act for not having it on the agenda, and we're taking item on something we can. So this would be a non-binding commitment of intent. So Chris, would you agree to meet
Yes.
in March?
Yes. Oh, me.
Chris Callihan, did you want to say something?
No, thank you.
Okay. Jeff, informally, would you agree to meet in March?
Absolutely.
Aidee, would you agree
Very
to
much
meet
so,
in March?
yes.
Mr. Sandoval, would you agree to
Yes.
meet in March? Alondra, would you agree to meet in March?
Yes, I do.
Thank you so much. So, and I will bring back up our city manager's, Mr. Kerrigan's suggestion that we set the time to set aside it to be educational, that we have a deep dive, that we have a history lesson, that we have our department heads get us up to speed to make us the most effective committee we can possibly be. So at this time, with no other further action items, I would like to just say that we've informally agreed to meet in March, but our scheduled next meeting is May 13th, 2021. And so I would hope that after our March meeting, we'll be even more fired up for that one. I know I'm going to be.